Mordhau's another one of those games that doesn't so much reiterate on what's come before, but instead refreshes an old cult favorite that's fallen to the wayside over the years. In this case, it's Chivalry's turn to get a new coat of paint and another round in the public eye, this time with a few added game modes and battlefield-scale conflicts. But Chivalry's soul, its swordplay, remains just as nuanced and integral in Mordhau, and it's still one of the best parts about these games. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today, we're learning how to stick the pointy end in Mordhau. Real quick before we get into the review proper, I've had a huge spike in traffic and subs this past week. Like, seriously, you guys nearly doubled my subscriber count, and that's just wild. So a big thank you to Errant Signal for highlighting the channel, and a big hello to everyone who's just started tuning in. Hope you all enjoy. But diving right in, if you're a fan of Chivalry, you're probably gonna like Mordhau. There's a long line of superfans that will tell you every little way that Mordhau is different, but to the casual scrub like myself, this basically feels like Chivalry 2. And just like Chivalry, Mordhau's beating heart is a complicated simulation of melee combat. At its most basic, that simulation is largely based on choosing what direction you want to swing at an enemy from, either above, from the side, or a thrust. But because Mordhau has a pretty quick and powerful parry, a duel is usually all about using fancy tricks to open your opponent up. You can riposte an attack by mirroring your opponent's swing at the same time you'd normally parry, but because you have to take longer to wind up, this can be risky if you don't predict your opponent's next move. The game also lets you switch up attacks on the fly, going from swing to thrust mid-attack if you can stop yourself soon enough. And perhaps the coolest tactic of all, you can actually change the timing of your attacks by just twisting your body so that your weapon reaches your opponent later in its arc. Of course, you won't be dueling all that often. 90% of the matches you'll jump into will look like this, where most of each team is all standing on top of each other in a big pile in one spot on the map. This means a few things. One, almost nobody plays the objective, and matches are usually one-sided meat grinders decided by who gets the middle point in the initial engagement. And two, more often than not, you'll be in the middle of a big pile of flailing bardages and sailing limbs, where your life expectancy will be extremely short. These massive scrums don't always give the game's combat system a chance to shine, since just as often as not you'll be stabbing someone in the back when they aren't paying attention, but they easily make for their own chaotic fun, and learning when you can dart in and hit someone and when you're overextending is an art in and of itself. Mordhau's combat is fun enough that, honestly, I don't blame people for ignoring the metagame and just standing in a pile slagging each other. I didn't see a single comeback or back and forth game the entire time I played, which is a big red flag that Mordhau's overarching metagame and matchmaking probably have some issues. But the moment-to-moment gameplay is so great that even hopeless losing matches are fun. Sure, you sometimes lose the war, but you also win some pretty fun battles along the way, and that's something you get to walk away with every game, win or lose. There are also a select few additions that Mordhau has introduced into the game that you won't find in Chivalry, namely Cavalry and siege equipment, which basically work like power weapons. Both are incredibly strong because 90% of your opponents are just carrying a sword around. Catapults can safely one-shot someone while sitting just outside their own team's spawn, making a retaliatory assault suicide, and cavalry can obviously outrun infantry, meaning you have an extremely narrow window to attack them. So long as you're not a dumbass like me and don't lop off the head of your own horse, you're practically immortal. Everything I've talked about so far is in Mordhau's standard Frontline mode. But did you know that this game also bolted on a Battle Royale and Horde mode? And I do mean bolted on. As far as Battle Royale modes go, Mordhau's is a bit of a joke. It uses everything from the same maps to the same server architecture, which means 48-man games on maps that were designed to be linear tug-of-wars, not free-for-alls. And that's assuming you even managed to fill up a server, which matchmaking never could. There's barely a point to looting once you find a weapon you like, and best I can tell, you can only see the map on the respawn screen in normal games, so that means you can't even use it here to figure out when and where the circle is coming from. It just shows up, and you better pray you can run away. Overall, just don't bother with this mode. Now, Horde mode, on the other hand, is accidentally a lot of dumb fun. You would think a hyper-deadly game where you die in 1 or 2 hits would make horde mode, where you're expected to go up against waves of enemies, a difficult proposition. But the game's simple AI is hysterically easy to manipulate and cheese, which provides a surprising amount of entertainment. The most effective strategy I found was just to grab a dagger and run circles around a pack while mashing the attack button. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's not the best horde mode I've ever seen by far, but it is a lot of fun to just explore and mess around in. The last major element to Mordhau is character customization, though I didn't find much value in it. Ostensibly, the point of this is so that you can build your own customized set of equipment, but with only 1 or 2 exceptions, all of your choices are indistinguishable side grades to weapons already covered by the pre-made classes. The game also screws you on the cosmetic side. Here again, the game gives you 8 different skin tones, but each one is so pathetically identical that I don't know why they even bothered. You're not even allowed to give your character so much as a tan, much less make them a minority. You also just straight up can't make a female character. To be fair, Mordhau has some pretty decent customization with its armor, and there's a surprisingly good slider for deciding your character's build, but anyone that likes to make a character that vaguely represents them is going to encounter some pretty insulting exclusions. But wrapping this up, what do you get out of 5 hours with Mordhau? This is one of those games I always try to look for, where your mileage varies based on how much you love it. If you're like me, you can pick this up, play it for 5, maybe 10 hours, and then walk away fully content having enjoyed some fun times swinging overcompensating swords around. But it's a multiplayer-focused game, so that means you can also keep playing as long as you're still having fun. But if I'm being honest, the bulk of what works in Mordhau is all holdovers from Chivalry. The scant additions they bring to that formula, the metagame, the new maps, the new modes, horses and catapults, almost all have problems. But the core combat loop that Mordhau inherited from Chivalry remains intact and compelling. A match of Mordhau isn't very fun. A fight in Mordhau is fantastic. And the moment-to-moment gameplay is good enough that despite its flaws, Mordhau's still worth checking out. And if you want some more slick sword-slinging action, be sure to check out my recent review of Katana Zero and my somewhat less recent review of Bladed Fury. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. If you did, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. If you're looking for games that value your time and don't pad themselves, I'm your guy. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.